Hello and welcome into Big Talk, college sports with a Midwest perspective, blue collar and blue blood. I'm Dalton Shetler. There on the other side of your screen, if you're joining us on the visual medium, is Sam Sprunger. Sam, it's Friday. It's game day in the Big Ten. There's a lot to be excited about this morning.
Yeah. It's Friday. I mean, the end of the work week is always a blessed event. And then you just, during football season, you just know that weekend is packed with football.
Which, by the way, this weekend's football slate, one of the best we've had in a very long time. There are 6 ranked games, top 25 versus top 25. This is only the second time since November of 2017 that we've had 6 ranked games in a single weekend. That stat came from Ben Stevens.
Both teams are ranked in the top 25.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. We have 6 of them. There's 2 of them with Big Ten flavor. So we're going to be getting into all of those big contests. There's also some other pretty big Big Ten games that aren't top 25 versus top 25. We'll be talking about those as well. But there's a lot to get into. Matter of fact, with this weekend coming up, all this football talk, we even got the basketball schedules in the middle of this past week as well. So we are, 45, 50 days, somewhere in that ballpark.
So is that like the wish list then? Like, kids writing out their Christmas list? The schedule's coming out. You're like, oh, write down your Christmas lists. And then all of a sudden Christmas comes around and you get all these gifts of great
all
games.
At the same time. Yeah, that's, I mean, I had been waiting for this one for a minute because, I mean, as we know, like I've confessed on here before, basketball is my true love. Like football's great. I enjoy it. But basketball is a passion. So very excited. And with my Michigan State interest and Sam's fandom of Purdue, these 2 teams look really, really good heading into this next year. Probably,
and they only play once scheduled.
They play once, and it's the second to last weekend of the regular season. So we can get into some of that later. But it's also at Mackey Arena, where Michigan State hasn't won since 2014. So we'll talk about that later on.
It still could change. It could end.
At some point, it has to end. It can't. It's not infinite, right?
Let's not make it this year.
It can't be forever. I mean, Cassius Winston, as legendary as he was, there's only one Big Ten gym he never won in. Mackey Arena. Like, it's the place is just a black hole for opposing teams. But let's stay with football because there's a lot we got to get into for this upcoming weekend. And I know you're all probably excited for us to get into the previews of some of these matchups. But we want to start a little bit with a little bit of what we gleaned from last weekend, because I think it might affect how we preview some of this stuff. Like Ohio State, there have been questions about that offense through the first couple of weeks. Can they pull it together? Well, against Western Kentucky, Kyle McCord and the Buckeyes put up 63 points on the scoreboard, and it kind of felt like there was still not a giant exhale, but a small sigh of relief around Columbus. You're shaking your head. No, you have a different experience?
Yeah, because I live in the middle of this territory.
Yeah.
And what I've heard, now there are some that are actually logical Ohio State fans, which I didn't know existed in spades. But now it was Western Kentucky. They should have. Oh, my good Lord. You were sitting there saying the sky was falling against Youngstown State, that we normally put 70. Now they do, and you're still complaining. Come on. If they beat Notre Dame this week by 40, they'll still be like, well, it's not Michigan. I mean,
it's just always something.
Yeah, I think they have to have something to worry about.
We need to create a character for the show, the optimistic Ohio State fan, where that kind of zags while everybody's digging. No, guys, we still got the W. We were able to put some points up there. Like, we need to create that character as a bit for the show.
And yeah, now honestly, they did exactly what everybody expects Ohio State to do.
Yep.
So like they covered by a wide margin. Like they did everything they should have done the first 2 previous weeks, I guess, but they were working into it. They still haven't won a game by less than 20 points.
What a burden it is to be a Buckeye. Isn't it something? What an experience.
So, they looked a heck of a lot better than what they have. It looks, I mean, and yes, I understand it is Western Kentucky compared to Notre Dame, but
Yeah.
they're doing what they should have. Now, if they perform that way, but against a better Notre Dame team, they should win.
Mm-hmm.
Are people going to be happy with that? I don't know.
Well, and what's funny to me too, and correct me if you had any different observation, but I didn't think there was anything drastically different that happened with the Western Kentucky game besides Kyle McCord just kind of settled in a little bit more. Like it just seems like this offense, like with all this talent, all these great pieces. You know, Tim May of Letterman Row, who's written for Ohio State and covered Ohio State for like 40 plus years, he uses the analogy all the time when we talk with Ohio State with him that the Ohio State offense is a sports car. And you just need somebody in there to just be able to drive that. But it seems like it zips and zags, like everything's moving so fast. Once you're able to get that groove, once you can find that rhythm, and it felt like Kyle McCord finally got a taste of that rhythm a little bit. He was getting on beat last week.
And that's what I was going to say. At some point, it clicks. And it looked like last week it started to click for him.
Yeah.
You know, for whatever reason, it took 8 quarters, heaven forbid, of 40 more points than your other team, you know, all told, you know, but 2 games of really getting into the groove, and then all of a sudden it clicked. And this week you may have thought that that's the guy that is going to win the Heisman. Like I'm not saying he will, but I'm saying you just at some point all of a sudden he's like, oh, I get it, you know, or it just starts falling into place, or he's able balls go in, you know, at certain time, you know, just something finally clicks and it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. And
now
I think he finally learned to drive the sports car.
And I think the big question now will be, can he keep that going? And we'll talk about with what's coming up ahead between Ohio State and Notre Dame, because I think this is a very interesting matchup, besides the fact that it's 2 top 10 teams. But I think there's a lot of things that are fascinating about it. But we'll get to that when we preview. There was another game we wanted to talk a little bit about, or Sam wanted to talk a little bit about. I wanted to rip it up and just forget it ever happened. But it was Washington making the trip to Michigan State. Washington gets the win 41-7. It was the first game under acting head coach Harlan Barnett for Michigan State. Obviously, and we'll get Sam's take here, Washington is a very, very good football team. And like, I'm not sure if I'm stressing that enough. Like Washington's going to make a run in that Pac-12. Like that Pac-12 is going to be fun to watch.
Can I make my
race
statement that we talked about before? And I said, we'll wait until this.
Sure.
Game? I think Washington's the best team in the country.
Whoa. In the country.
Yes.
Better than Georgia.
I think Georgia has shown that they're still recouping from that. I mean, they lost a lot from their national championship team. They are a great team. I'm not taking anything away from Georgia, but at some point they're not going to be the best anymore. You know, somebody's going to supersede that. And I think at the combination of what Washington's got and what they've been doing to their opponents, Michigan State, while they're struggling at certain points, they're a Power 5 team in, you know, and they're not. They've got the pieces there. They're just going through like this horrible transition into a different coaching regime. So, but the fact that they have absolutely dismantled everybody doing what they've done, I'm remiss to say that there's a better team. I don't know. I mean, Georgia struggled at points against South Carolina. They trailed at the half to South Carolina. So I'm not taking anything away from South Carolina necessarily, but Georgia, if you're that dominant, shouldn't be behind to South Carolina at the half. And I think Washington's better. I
don't have a strong argument to that. Like I can kind of ride with you on that. And to me, I mean, you watch that Washington offense and I don't know what you do if you sit back like Michigan State tried to drop people in coverage and just get there with 4. It felt like Penix had 12 seconds to throw 80-yard bombs downfield.
And he is on point too. Oh,
every
goodness.
time. It's incredible.
Yes.
To think he started at Indiana is amazing too. Like,
he actually was
amazing.
Successful at IU too. I mean,
yeah.
I can remember the game against Ohio State where it was close. IU
Close.
almost beat them, and it was Penix was there.
Remember the Penn State game where he dove for the pylon to get the win in that opener? That it's amazing to think about. But and so if you drop back at coverage, you play with that. But if you decide to blitz, these Washington receivers are so good, and the quick slants, like they will just slant you to death. I really don't know. Like, obviously, there's the saying, pick your poison. I don't know what you do when you play Washington. They are just that good. Now, on the other side, Michigan State, you're right, is reeling a little bit. I think we're going to learn a little bit more about Michigan State with this game against Maryland here tomorrow in East Lansing. But what concerns me as somebody with Michigan State interest is Talia Tagovailoa comes in, and he's kind of a duplicate in ways of Penix. Yeah, like
a big deal.
The way Maryland likes to play on the perimeter and stuff, like it's very much reminiscent of what Washington does. Now, I think Washington does it better, and I think Washington's bigger. So I think Maryland's susceptible to a little bit of physicality, but can Michigan State come out and punch the Terps in the mouth? Like that's going to be a big question mark, especially given everything that's just happened.
Well, and with Michigan State, and this is not making an excuse, but everybody would understand if they just packed it in and the season was done. We're literally 3 weeks into the season, and if they went for the rest of, I don't think anybody would blame them. Now, I think those young men have more pride, and they're not going to let that happen.
And Harlan Barnett, the acting head coach, has a lot of that pride.
So and that's not a bad thing. You need to be proud of the colors that you're wearing. Doesn't matter what they're going through outside or previous staff or whatever is going on, and everybody knows what's going on. We just choose not to address it. And but what I'm getting at is those young men have that opportunity to say, you know what, we're not going to let that define us. And so I don't see. But their first game after all that happening, coming against Washington, was just the perfect storm of you're getting your butt whooped.
Yeah, and
and Washington's we feel bad for those guys in green, but we're still going to whoop their butts. We're still going to go play our game and beat them down, and they did. But I think Michigan State could still play with Maryland. I totally thought they'd play at least a half to 3/4 with Washington. I was way wrong, but my point being is they're, like you said, they're similar-ish in how they run their offenses, and I think Michigan State will be able to hold. I don't know that they're going to win, but I think they can hold their own with them.
And that's why I think we're going to learn a lot this weekend, and then we'll be able to kind of know a bit more about Michigan State and what the rest of the year looks like with them. I think this game, and especially like you look at the rest of the season, Michigan State's is 2-1 right now. I mean, you still have some Goliaths. There are 4 top 10 teams on that schedule. Washington was 1. I mean, you still have Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State sitting there. And then you have a road trip to Iowa mixed in. You have road trips to Minnesota, to Rutgers. You have Nebraska coming to your place. You have a road trip at Indiana mixed in there as well. Like, if you're looking at that schedule, if you beat Maryland, you have a chance to get back into postseason play. And that's tough given that schedule that we just mentioned. But like, that's kind of what we're looking at. Like, we're going to learn a little bit more about the team, the character of this team, and also what is the expectation moving forward? Should we be looking at them to try and make a bowl game? We're going to, I think, get a lot of those answers on Saturday.
And I think if you'd ask the coaching staff that we're going to be our drive is to be
100%.
But realistically, the people like us, and I'm not saying that we're ranked up there, I'm just saying people like us saying is it realistic that they get to 500? And right now, they're flirting with that. If they lose a couple of those games that are close calls, they might not make it. But
well, and I think Maryland's this pivotal game. I guess that's why I keep coming back to is like you beat Maryland, you get to 3-1, you're sitting pretty. We can talk about postseason expectations. If you lose this one and it's in rough shape, like then you really start to kind of question what is going to happen the rest of the way. So we're going to learn.
If they lose on a last-second field goal, you're still feeling okay about
it. Of course.
But if they get beat by 40 or, whatever, then you're like, okay, this is going to be a rough ride the rest of the way.
So it'll be interesting to see how it all plays. Let's get into previewing the games for this weekend. We mentioned there's some big ones. Michigan State and Maryland, since we're talking Michigan State. We mentioned Talia Tagovailoa. The Terps come in. Let's see how Michigan State responds. We've talked a little bit about that one, but let's go ahead and shift now. We talked about Ohio State and their performance over Western Kentucky last week. The Buckeyes head to South Bend, Indiana to take on Notre Dame in what is one of the bigger games in recent history in Notre Dame Stadium. Georgia coming there a handful of years ago was a big deal. There's been a couple of these games.
A few years ago was a big deal.
Yeah, during the COVID year. Yeah. But in terms of just hype and anticipation, when Clemson came, it was during COVID where there were no fans.
Right.
So this is one of the bigger...
I was talking about when Deshaun Watson was still with Clemson.
Oh, fair. Yeah.
That might have been 5 years ago or so, but however long ago it was his last year at Clemson. That was a big game too.
Well, one of the things I'm watching here for Notre Dame Stadium, they've tried in the past to protect their seats from opposing fan bases coming in and raiding them, and there's been some times it's been unsuccessful. When Georgia came up there was a lot of red in that stadium.
There's gonna be a lot of scarlet in the
a couple decades ago when Nebraska came, I think it was more Nebraska than it was Notre Dame in the stadium. And so Notre Dame administration and event staff has been working feverishly is the report I heard from somebody I was talking to in the South Bend area to make sure that it's a lot of green. They're going for a green out there at Notre Dame Stadium. They're doing everything they can to move some of the Ohio State fans in different areas. Just that way it breaks up some of the red. They're working hard.
They don't want a full
at making this happen. Yeah,
spotty.
Yeah, that's kind of what they're aiming for at this point. And they're handing out green little wristbands to light up and kind of go along with the sound that's happening and are going to be synchronized with light shows and different things that are happening. So from an environment standpoint, Notre Dame is expected to be rocking on Saturday like it really hasn't in the last few years.
With the two fan bases that are going to be there, that's a given that it's going to be rocking, but they're doing even more. My question is are they doing what other venues or other organizations tried to do and say you cannot sell your tickets to anybody that's not,
They're making it harder. They're making it harder. They are working on that.
I know a few years back, the Brewers, which is in Wisconsin, the state of Wisconsin, very close to Chicago, which is the state of Illinois where the Cubs are. They made it to where you had to have an IP address running in Wisconsin in order to buy to Cubs games.
Not only can Spotted Cow be the only thing bought in Wisconsin, but Brewers tickets as well.
So they've gotten it, but how can you justify that? These are my tickets. I should be able to sell them to who I want to because I've already paid for them. They're mine.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They're accelerating the prices higher and higher and higher. They're doing everything they can to make that as hard as possible.
Aftermarket is saying $453 a ticket.
Yeah, I believe it. It's going to be a day in South Bend. Yeah. But that talks a lot about the environment and what we should expect from that angle. Look, Notre Dame and Ohio State, they've played, I think, 7 times throughout history. And Notre Dame hasn't beaten the Buckeyes since 1936. So
I don't think either of us were born yet.
No, I wasn't.
A couple years away yet.
Wasn't even a twinkle in your mother's eye.
My dad wasn't even a twinkle in my grandpa's eye yet.
But 1936 was the last time Notre Dame beat Ohio State. And look, both Sam and I grew up in the state of Indiana. I mean, we've been around Notre Dame football for a long time. The last couple of decades, anytime Notre Dame and Ohio State matched up, it always felt pretty heavily balanced to one side, that like the talent was over there. Yep. And let's see what Notre Dame can do. I'm going to be honest, like even last year when Notre Dame and Ohio State met, when Notre Dame was playing with the lead, like at halftime, I was like, are you kidding me? Like,
you're shocked.
Not how this is supposed to feel at all. Right. And it just didn't match at all. But heading into this game, the feeling's a lot different. And I think the feeling's a lot different because for just about the first time since maybe the mid-2000s, Notre Dame's got a better quarterback than Ohio State does. Proven. Sam Hartman, the transfer from Wake Forest, has been great for Notre Dame. It's the best quarterback Notre Dame's had in a long time. I think it's such a game changer, and that doesn't even go into the rushing attack, the great offensive line. Running back Audric Estime is the number one rusher in the country right now with 521 rushing yards. Like, this is a different Notre Dame team than some in the past, and I think a lot of it just has to do with who's taking those snaps at quarterback. Sam Hartman, I think, has completely changed by himself, really, the feel around this one as we head into it.
You know what can change that? Is if the click against Western Kentucky was for real and Kyle McCord just tears it apart. Mm-hmm. If he does, then you're like, well, I guess we're back to where we thought.
Well, and I don't want to be like taken out of context here or anything, but Ohio State's more talented.
Yeah.
Like, I don't dispute that. What they have at receiver, everything else, like, I do 100% believe Ohio State has more talent on the field. But I think just Notre Dame having the better quarterback, and I feel confident saying Hartman's a better quarterback than McCord. I think that ultimately is that has this game where I'm kind of waffling as to who I think will win it more than I ever have with Notre Dame, Ohio State.
Well, and that's what I was getting at. It was, you know, unless that click was a fake click, and if it was a real, like, oh, now I get it, and now it's all coming easier to McCord, I agree wholeheartedly. I still think even if it does, that Sam Hartman is still the better quarterback at this point because he's proven. You know, McCord can help start his proving it by doing well against Notre Dame, but I don't know that I've got the confidence in that yet.
Well, and I like Notre Dame's defensive front, and I am curious how McCord will answer to some of the pressure. Will he be rattled? I mean, we know Hartman because of his days at Wake Forest and how composed he is, but will McCord feel some of that pressure? Like, that's something we just haven't seen yet. He's just, 3 games in? It was Indiana, Youngstown State, and Western Kentucky. So, like, he just hasn't felt much pressure yet. I'm curious how he responds to that in a hostile environment.
Are you saying IU's defense is not better than Notre Dame? Come on, Dalton.
Believe it or not. But I mean, that's one of the big things I'm looking forward to is to see if they get pressure on McCord and if he shuts down. I mean, that might be it. Ohio State has not gotten the rushing attack working the way they're used to with Mayan Williams, Travion Henderson. Like, they have great backs back there, but the rushing game has not been there 3 weeks in.
Well, excuse me. Sam Hartman may not be the best quarterback in the country when it comes to pocket presence and being able to withstand those pressures. But what you're getting at is he's at least witnessed it in person, in game, and knowing how to make those adjustments that Kyle McCord hasn't been able to do yet, and hasn't been. He's being baptized by fire right now by being thrown into that and figure it out. And if you've got it, then we're going to be okay. If not, it might be a long night for the Buckeyes.
We know what Sam Hartman is. We really don't know what Kyle McCord is, and
he could be better than Sam Hartman. We just don't know it yet.
And the other thing we haven't really talked about, I mean, Sam Hartman's going to go against a pretty good Ohio State secondary as well. And that's where I think A lot of that rushing attack from Notre Dame is going to have to play a pretty big part. Now, Ohio State's got a pretty good defensive line too. They finally started to get a little bit of pressure in the backfield in that last game against Western Kentucky, but the first 2 weeks, Indiana, Youngstown State were getting the ball out so fast. That way they didn't have to face that front four. To see how Notre Dame kind of manages that pressure, but also that good secondary, that's going to be interesting as well. It's going to take a nice job out of Marcus Freeman and staff to try and manage.
Well, right now they've only given up 20. The Ohio State defense has only given up 20 points, and that's granted. I know it's against IU, Youngstown State, and Western Kentucky, but still, the point being is they've got a really solid defense.
Yep.
This could be a 17-14 game, or it could be 45-42. About the time we tout the defenses, it's going to be an offensive explosion, but. I foresee it being. I don't think either team's going to run away with it. I don't
think so either.
Blowout on either side. I don't
think so.
And I don't care if a team wins by double digits. I don't anticipate it being. Well, that was a lot closer than what it actually was played out to be. No, I think it's going to be the other way around. That a team adds a touchdown late to make it 10 points at the end or whatever. I don't see it being more than a one possession game. At most of the game.
No, and I'm with you. It's so fascinating to me. And again, I said it earlier, but I keep coming back to it. Like talking with Notre Dame fans, it's the first time they've been kind of confident heading into one of these games, and not like outlandishly confident. Not saying they're going to win, but like. You feel like you really can go toe-to-toe a little bit in this matchup, and I just don't think that's ever existed for Notre Dame fans heading into a game with Ohio State, except for maybe that first Fiesta Bowl. But go on.
Not being a fan of either team. This is more of those times that when I hear a Notre Dame fan say, "Yeah, we've got a shot," I wouldn't be like, "Yeah, you're a Notre Dame fan." You know what I mean? Like I'm like, "Yeah, I think they do have a good shot," and I
which
think
is just so weird,
isn't it?
So weird. Go ahead.
I grew up with Notre Dame being obnoxious because they were that good. You know what I mean? It just.
Well, but you were there for the 88 championship, the Tony Rice days, so on and so forth. Like,
I got an autograph by him somewhere.
I think I do too, actually.
He signed a picture.
I think it's over there. Give me a minute. I might run and grab it.
He was a Heisman finalist when Andre Ware won the Heisman.
Correct. But like 95 is when I was born. Yeah. Like I grew up during
the Notre Dame national title
at all. So like I grew up during Bob Davie, Ty Willingham, and Charlie Wise in Indiana. Like, yeah. Like, so the idea that Notre Dame's going to go toe to toe with Ohio State, or you at least have that anticipation heading into it, it's a different feeling than I'm used to. It hasn't existed in
Lou Holt.
Yeah. That was pretty good. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to Iowa Penn State. There is a whiteout in Happy Valley. This one interests me a little bit too. You just shot a look across that. I'm not sure if it interests you at all, but
I was looking to see where it is at Penn State. That's what I was looking at.
Okay, yeah. So a whiteout at Penn State. Iowa comes to town. The Hawkeyes are down one of their top tight ends in Luke Lachey. It looks like he might be done for the year. And we know how Iowa uses the tight ends in its system. Like that is a huge piece. We still don't know if Cade McNamara is really 100%. Cade McNamara hasn't looked stellar starting off his Hawkeye career in Iowa City. Penn State, on the other hand, looks like they have a quarterback in Drew Aller. That running back stable with Singleton looks really strong. Maybe some questions at receiver, but that defense we know is really dang good. What do you see heading into this one?
Well, I underestimated Iowa's powerhouse of an offense last week because they beat the spread. They got it they beat
scored 41 points.
Beat Western Michigan by 31 and were favored by 28. So
did you see the Brian Ferentz deep fake video?
No.
Oh, folks, if you have not seen that yet, go ahead and find that. It is a fake. Somebody used like AI to put over his voice and everything. It's It's really well done. It fooled a lot of the sports media people. That's why it got so much attention, because it fooled a lot of people. But go ahead and check that one out. I don't really want to quote what it said, but go ahead and check that one out if you want to laugh there, folks.
But I still don't. I don't know that I can buy that they're legit enough to hang with Penn State. Especially like you said, with the injuries and McNamara maybe still not being 100%. And, you know, should he have sat out week 1 just to make sure to get healthier? Because no matter how many times, or, you know, how easy, and I use easy in quotes because, you know, nothing's easy for Iowa, but, you know, you're taking hits and you're constantly keeping whatever's wrong with you aggravated to some point. Would that extra week have done something? Maybe not. And maybe that's why they said, you know, go for it, you know, and maybe this is going to be a thing that he deals with all year. But Penn State's firing on both sides of the ball. They're for real. Like they're and you know, they're my pick to win the East. So I really do think that this could be Penn State 45, Iowa 9. Iowa's defense scores all 9.
You got it. A 34-point game or 36-point game. Okay, I was gonna say. was that your Bear super fan impersonation for predictions? Yep. Very nice.
Hurricane Ditka 75.
He said Ditka versus a hurricane. Ditka.
The hurricane's named Ditka.
Hurricane's named Ditka. Ooh. But yeah, no, I'm kind of with you. I've been talking with a couple of people recently where they weren't as big of believers in Penn State as what I am, but I believe that defense is so good. I believe the offense is working out really, really well. Do they not have the same dynamic playmaker at receiver that they have in years past with Jahan Dotson, Parker Washington, some of those, Juwan Johnson? Sure. But I think they got enough where they're going to win this Saturday, and I also think they can make a real run, like you, to get to Indy and play in that Big Ten title game. Because I look at these teams, Ohio State, we've talked about it. They have still some inconsistency at the quarterback position. That's a big deal.
Sure does.
Michigan has not ran the ball the same way they did all of the last 2 years. The reason why they were back-to-back champs.
Excuse me, and their first test is going to be Penn State.
What is that date? November
11th.
It really is November. That's crazy.
Yes, November. It's Veterans Day. Veterans Day is the first real test. Taking into consideration the teams they're playing prior to don't turn into some sort of a surprise of some sort.
Right.
Yes, that will be their first test, and that's going to be a tough one. Even though they host them, you know, that's going to be their first punch in the mouth almost.
Oh, you're just collecting 200 and passing Rutgers, huh?
Yeah. Hey, you can go see that Michigan Rutgers game for $70 at the Big House. But yet you can go watch Purdue and Wisconsin tonight for $8.
Well, we're on our way. But let's go ahead and talk about Purdue, Wisconsin, since we've landed here. Purdue, Wisconsin. Purdue has not won this game in 20 years. 2003 is the last time Purdue beat Wisconsin. These are two teams that are still kind of trying to find their footing and identity with a couple of first-year head coaches at those schools. Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, Ryan Walters at Purdue, and they've both taken a couple of lumps in the non-conference stretch. Heading into this one, what do you see?
I'm a hopeful Purdue fan, but not delusional, I guess. You and I talked about it a little bit before we started. That Purdue's issue is their defense. Ironically enough, they hire a defensive coach, and their defense is their problem. Now, the reason why I say that it's ironic is you know, you would think, of course, you know, a defense, they should have a stellar defense. Well, you got to realize that's not the same system that they were running last year. Now, granted, their system last year was still giving up 28 points a game.
Right.
But with what Ryan Walters is wanting to install, it's something completely different than what the pieces he has there. So it's going to be a struggle, and that's the problem that I've got with what Purdue's been doing. They've been able to put in points on the board. Granted, they only scored 20 against Syracuse, but near the end of the game, they were trying to, throw the ball, when they could have been running it, and it just, and they could not stop Garrett Schrader. I mean, he's a legit quarterback, and if he's got a year after he graduates, he's going to make one heck of a great quarterback at another place for a season too.
It feels like he's been there a while, doesn't it?
It does, but I don't know exactly, how long he has been here. This might be his third year, but Wisconsin struggled with Georgia Southern last week though too, at Camp Randall. Mm-hmm. So this, and I think that's what you're kind of getting at is these two teams are coming in with a little bit of an identity problem. Like they don't have the ability to say, this is what we are, this is what we're gonna do. Now Wisconsin's got a little bit more footing on where they might identify, but they're still kind of trying to figure out where they're at too, because like Purdue, they've got a first-year coach trying to install his system into these pieces that weren't originally brought in to fit into that system.
Yeah. And that's what, I mean, you kind of nailed it on the head. I really don't know exactly what to expect in this one. I think Wisconsin is the better team. I think they're more talented. They just have more pieces. But since we've been talking, I watched the line just jump on ESPN from 6 to 5.5. Wisconsin's favored. So it's got a little bit tighter. But 5.5 is what Wisconsin's favored in West Lafayette. So I think Vegas kind of sees that the same way, that maybe Wisconsin's better by a touchdown, but I don't think anybody really knows what to make of either of these teams. And that seems to be the case with so many of these Big Ten teams right now.
Well, that's the crazy thing is after 3 weeks, we still have a ton of questions as to these teams. Not many of these teams are really filtering out to what we thought or giving us clear answers of to what they are.
They're all flawed. Correct. That's not usually the case. Usually Ohio State, Michigan, you're like, yep, those guys are two perfect units that are just going to collide in like a major, like what, King Kong and Transformers kind of battle or something. Yeah, King Kong Godzilla. Like, yeah, like I like that's normally what we've been seeing in Big Ten seasons, but this year everybody has flaws, and I really don't know. I guess the Wisconsin-Purdue game is just a good representation of flawed teams battling it out.
Would we be safe, or would you even agree with saying that Penn State's probably the most rounded team at this moment after 3 weeks, the most rounded team?
I think so.
I think so too.
That's where I'm currently at. That's why I think Penn State's going to maybe win that division. And maybe tomorrow we get to learn something new about Penn State, and maybe there is a different flaw in there. And if somebody's going to expose it on offense, Iowa's defense will go ahead and show it to you. Phil Parker is just a madman there on the defensive sideline for Iowa. So maybe we learn something, but as we sit right now, like, to me, Penn State's the best team.
Can we change the Hawkeyes name to IDWA? There's no I in Iowa, but there is a D.
That would be great. Just switch the O and D. That would be perfect. Somewhere we got to work a P in for the punter.
IDWA?
Oh man, but yeah, so I'm with you. I think Wisconsin's probably going to win this one, but hopefully we'll learn a little bit more tonight from these two Big Ten teams. The other games on tap, we've talked about quite a few of them. Wrapping up some non-conference action, Indiana will host Akron tomorrow night. For Indiana, needing to get that second win under their belt as they wrap up non-conference play if they want to have any chance of winning some games in the Big Ten and maybe trying to get to a postseason play. Got to win that one. Also, Minnesota is at Northwestern tomorrow night.
That's more expensive to go to than Illinois, Florida Atlantic. You can go to Northwestern, Minnesota for $6.
So how cheap was Illinois, Florida Atlantic?
$3.
Oh my. Oh boy. So Illinois, Florida Atlantic, you're right. Tomorrow afternoon takeaway. Nebraska will host Louisiana Tech tomorrow afternoon. And then, as we mentioned earlier briefly, Michigan will host Rutgers tomorrow at noon. None of those games really seem to be much in question to me, at least as we're talking right now. But
if there's an upset, minus Ohio State, Notre Dame, because those are top 10, we're not going to call that an upset if Notre Dame would win. Of these games, what possible upset of the favored teams would you say is most plausible? Not necessarily saying it's going to happen, but could happen.
Well, I got to tell you, I don't know anything about Florida Atlantic. Not a single thing.
That would be a rather large upset, huh?
Yeah, but
I know a lot about their basketball team.
Same, yeah.
Dusty May,
Final Four,
fantastic coach, and I made him laugh.
Yeah, analysis. That's our analysis. Dusty May and the Owls taking down Illinois. But I suppose out of those teams, I do believe Indiana's going to be able to kind of iron itself out. Now, what that ceiling is, I don't really know. But they only lost by a touchdown to Louisville last week. Like, I do think there is something to that Hoosier squad. Is there something enough to get to a postseason? I really am not sure. But I don't think they're going to drop to Akron. Illinois has been very disappointing so far this year. Got walloped by Penn State last week, 30-13. We know they lost to Kansas 34-23 in week 2, and they didn't look great in week 1. So maybe that's where I'm going to land. Toledo, that's right. Thank you. Maybe that's where I land that. Maybe FAU can come in, but again, I don't like the chances of any of those upsets potentially happening.
So you don't think Rutgers goes into the big house and shocks the world and beats number 2, huh? That
would be simply amazing. I got to tell you.
I think the biggest upset would be if Notre Dame and Ohio State somehow figured out how to tie.
They play 35 of those 2-point conversion overtimes until
we're good. We're calling it. We're good.
But this is absolutely a slate to be excited for as a Big Ten football fan. It's going to be a lot of fun getting into. I did want to pull up here before we end up closing things out. We talked a little bit about the Big Ten basketball schedules. Circle the calendar. The big one again for the men's side. Michigan State and Purdue are the 2 favorites heading into the year. Michigan State will be at Purdue in the only meeting between them on March 2nd. That's a Saturday in West Lafayette. So heading into that game, I mean, just looking at it from like a distant view, I think Michigan State's got to have a game advantage on Purdue heading into that final week, because then Michigan State,
because Purdue's going to be undefeated.
Of course, 40-0, the Boilers. Then Northwestern will go to Michigan State for that next game, and then Michigan State wraps up at Indiana. So Michigan State has a pretty hellacious final week because, again, Northwestern's a pretty difficult out. That final week for MSU is going to be tough. So the Spartans are going to have a bit of a lead heading into that final week, because if you go through that 3-0, then God bless you. Yeah. But like you could expect to drop maybe one there.
I'm looking at Purdue's schedule, and it's actually and granted, you got to remember, I grew up in a time when Purdue didn't play a lot of tough teams in their preseason.
Mm-hmm.
They play Gonzaga, they play Arizona, they've got Xavier. Like, this is actually a difficult preseason. Good for Matt Painter to actually start scheduling them and realize that even if you lose it, you know, you're making your team better and ready for. He's taken a little bit of a page out of Tom Izzo's playbook to toughen up your team going into league play in order to set yourself up for March.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Well, and it's funny you mentioned that.
Going undefeated.
It's funny you mentioned that too, because Michigan State will be playing Arizona, I believe, Thanksgiving Day. Oh, okay. So both of those teams are actually going to get their hands on Arizona. I did also want to take a brief moment to look at the women's basketball side. Yeah. The highly anticipated matchups on this side. Indiana, who won the Big Ten championship last year, will be at Iowa on January 13th. this upcoming season. And of course, Caitlin Clark's back for the Hawkeyes. We know how that game finished last year at the end of the regular season in Iowa City, where Caitlin Clark hit that game winner buzzer beater. That was so dramatic.
Mhm.
So that's game
Grace
one.
Grace Berger is not with the Hoosiers.
Berger is gone, but
Is she
Mackenzie
the only
Holmes
one?
is
I was gonna
back.
say Holmes is back. I knew that.
IU's
that's
got a
the
lot
big-
of pieces.
Right.
Yarden Garzone is back. Chloe Moore McNeil is back. Like, Indiana brought a lot back. Iowa,
So
on
you
the
could
other
almost
hand,
see a repeat of their, not an exact repeat, but a good replica of what they did last year.
as we sit right now, I mean, I think Indiana's maybe the best top to bottom team on the women's side in the Big Ten, because Iowa, they do bring back Caitlin Clark, and that still means a lot no matter what.
For sure.
But they lost Monica Sonano. They lost McKenna Warnock. Like, there's a lot of pieces in there that are gone. So Iowa's going to need some new role players to step up and really kind of iron themselves out and let Caitlin be Caitlin. But the team that IU has, it's hard not to love. And then they meet a second time on February 22nd in Bloomington, with just a couple of games after that to go to close out the regular season for those two squads. But those are the two maybe iconic or most anticipated matchups heading into the year on the women's side, is when Indiana and Iowa will clash.
Well, and Maryland took a step back because Diamond Miller's not there anymore, and that's not to say that they can't do something. It's just when you've got a superstar like that is no longer on your team, you have an identity crisis, a little bit of an identity crisis for a little bit, kind of like Ohio State and their quarterback. They have an identity crisis, so they've got to figure out who they are.
I didn't mean to jump in there, but they do lose. You're right, Diamond Miller, but Abby Myers, that shooter as well, will be gone. They do bring back Cheyenne Sellers, the daughter of NBA former player Brad Sellers.
Yep.
And she was great last year. So, like, Maryland should still be okay. There's a lot of different teams with some different pieces.
Ohio State's still going to be good.
Ohio State's going to be very good. They lost Taylor Mikesell, but they still bring back Taylor Theory, Cody McMahon, who really came on at the end of her freshman season. Yeah. Illinois brings just about everybody back. Makyra Cook, Genesis Bryant, like Kendall Bostic.
And correct me if I'm wrong, didn't they make the tournament for like the first time in 20 years last year with that crew?
Under a first-year head coach, Shauna Green. Like, there's the momentum there. So, and I know we'll get into previewing the both men's and women's Big Ten seasons a little bit more later on, but I just wanted to, with those schedules announced, those are some dates to keep in mind.
It's our wish list.
I know. Been so excited for it for so long. But, I mean, before we fully get into basketball, we do have a heck of a football lineup this weekend.
Yes.
Again, Notre Dame, Ohio State tomorrow night. You also have Iowa and Penn State tomorrow. Those are going to be some good ones. Is there one? I know we've talked a lot about these games, so we don't need to necessarily preview them again, Sam. But before we close out here, is there one that you're most excited for out of those two? Because I imagine those two are the most exciting to you rather than any of the other ones on tap.
You said Penn State, Iowa, Notre Dame, Ohio State.
Yeah.
Of those two, I'm probably – oh, gosh, they're on at the same time even. You know what? You know what's nice is I have Dish to where I can do the split screen and watch them both at the same time.
Oh, nice.
When it comes to Saturdays, I really have got it good because they allow the 4-screen. So, and during basketball season, I can do the same thing. So I'll probably watch them both at the same time, but I'm anticipating, I want to see what Ohio State's got. I really do. I'm pretty confident that we, for the most part, know what Penn State is. Now, they may struggle against a top-tier defense like Iowa's, but, we don't know what Ohio State is right now offensively. We know what they have other than their quarterback, but we all know the field general is how the offense runs. So you can have all the nice toys, but if you don't have somebody that knows how to operate that sports car, it doesn't go anywhere. And so that's what I'm going to watch.
And I've seen plenty of Iowa upsets over Penn State when they didn't really have business winning those games. Like, I mean, Iowa's had plenty of those upsets in the past. I've never seen Notre Dame upset Ohio State. Again, they haven't beat them since 1936.
Yeah.
With the feeling that they actually might, like that draws me into this matchup so much. I'm really excited to see what happens between those two.
If the Irish win this game, I think Lou Holtz will have a good interview with them.
To the national championship. That's always the best part is when he was doing that college game show, football game, and he always had Notre Dame go to the national championship. Just tremendous. Just tremendous.
I tell you what, it was so odd having seen him for so long at Notre Dame. When he went to South Carolina, it just my mind broke. It really did. It broke while he was there because it didn't make sense.
Yeah. No, I completely get that. All right. Well, that'll close us down for this edition of Big Talk. Sam, before we actually say goodbye, you want to let everybody know where they can find us?
Well, actually, I don't know if how much we're on the TikToks, but I know we've got an account. Let's say it that way. Because Tony, our former full-time third person and occasional fill-in now, is the one that runs that, and I don't know how much he posts on it because I am not on the TikToks, so I don't know. But you can find us on TikToks, Instagram, and the platform formerly known as Twitter at B1G_talk. That's Big Talk. It's a 1, Dalton, not an I. B1G_talk. Big Talk. You go to Facebook. It's B1G Big Talk. Not all Big Talk. It's just Big Talk. But then you can find us every week on the ASAP network, streamed live, well, live-ish, every week on the ASAP network. If you miss our live stream, we are out through Lounge Media Group everywhere you can find podcasts. But if you want to watch us, our responses physically, you can go to Spotify and watch the replay there on Spotify.
All right. So that'll do it for another edition of Big Talk. I want to thank you all again so much for tuning in and joining us. I'm Dalton Shetler. That's Sam Sprunger. Everybody, so long, and go enjoy this great weekend of college football.
Yeah. See you later.